I read Rory Sutherland's Alchemy for you, and here are my 4 biggest lessons. But in addition to lessons, I'm also going to be breaking those down into actionable takeaways that you can apply to your business today. So even if you don't read Alchemy, you're going to be able to walk away with some juicy tidbits that you can use to really take your business to the next level. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty, the big aha moments from Alchemy, let's review what Rory says is the premise for this entire book. By the way, Rory is truly a legend in the marketing and branding space. He has been with Ogilvy advertising for over 30 years, and he has contributed so much valuable knowledge to this field. He has a playful, humorous approach that really makes him a delight to learn from. So, Rory's rules of alchemy. The opposite of good can also be a good idea. Don't design for average. It doesn't pay to be logical if everyone else is being logical. The nature of our attention affects the nature of our experience. A flower is simply a weed with an advertising budget. The problem with logic is that it kills off magic. A good guess which stands up to observation is still science. So is a lucky accident. Test counterintuitive things only because no one else will. Solving problems using rationality is like playing golf with only one club. Dare to be trivial. If there were a logical answer, we would have found it. Now, not to be too much of a stickler, but right off the bat, from my perspective, these rules are all dancing around the same thing, which is essentially creativity and brilliant solutions defy logic. What is expected, where our minds immediately go, is oftentimes not going to take us where we are aspiring to journey. And so that is a thesis that he really establishes from the very beginning of the book and then really carries throughout the entirety of it. Now, one of the problems that I found with this book is that it reads more like a career memoir. It doesn't have that same step-by-step process or framework or general guidelines and rules that I'm used to when reading a business book. Now, this is not to say that it's bad. It's just to align expectations about what you might be hoping to gain from this. If you're hoping that by reading Alchemy, you're going to get a playbook to be able to start coming up with brilliant ideas like Rory, then unfortunately, I'm sorry to say that you're probably going to be incredibly disappointed. However, if you are looking to be inspired, to see how a truly brilliant creative mind works, and to get the enjoyment of learning about a robust and successful career, then you're going to really be in for a treat with this book. So it's all about expectations. And I think it's really important to align those because I actually was recommended this book so many times that I thought, well, I just have to read it. And I was hoping for something that had some more concrete guidelines of how to actually apply these lessons. And while they do exist there, I suppose I didn't necessarily walk away feeling like I really knew how to apply this book into my business and into my professional life, which is why I felt like this video would be a really valuable thing to create, because perhaps you read Alchemy and you're wondering, okay, but what were the lessons? Or maybe you're thinking about reading it. And by the way, I'm not giving anything away. The majority of the meat and the delectable parts of this book are really waiting to still be discovered once we get to the end of this video. However, reading it, knowing what you're in for, but then also having this as a companion piece to be able to think about how you can take all of these morsels and apply them, or perhaps you decide it's not worth your read, and then hopefully you walk away with some good tidbits and you can carry on your merry way. So because this is really more of a career memoir than a traditional business book, I did find it difficult to pull out the key lessons and takeaways like it is so obviously from many other business books. And on top of that, I've read so many branding, marketing, creativity books. And so I'm not coming in as a novice and a beginner. I'm coming in already with a lot of experience and familiarity with the topic. And so it's possible that somebody that's brand new might look at this with a very different set of eyeballs. So number one, humans are irrational, even when we think we are being incredibly logical. This is a topic that I find endlessly fascinating. And if you also like this kind of human psychology and trying to understand why so often we do things that are counterintuitive to what even seems like our best interest, then you will definitely get a lot of other great examples to demonstrate how we are just oftentimes completely illogical creatures making our way through life. This is also a topic that he addresses in one of his really famous TED Talks from many years ago. And to show you an example of what he's talking about, I thought, let's just go ahead and hear those words straight from Rory himself.
I think one of the problems with classical economics is it's absolutely preoccupied with reality. And reality isn't a particularly good guide to human happiness. Why, for example, are pensioners much happier than the young unemployed? Both of them, after all, are in exactly the same state of life. You both have too much time on your hands and not much money. But pensioners are reportedly very, very happy, whereas the unemployed are extraordinarily unhappy and depressed. The reason, I think, is that the pensioners believe they've chosen to be pensioners, whereas the young unemployed feel it's been thrust upon them. The power to rebrand things, to understand that actually our experiences, costs, things, don't actually much depend on what they really are, but on how we view them.
So in this example, Rory is talking about how just a simple way that we define our experience completely shifts the way that we perceive it and whether we think of it as something positive or negative, both the way that we are actually experiencing it and how others perceive us as well. Now, one of the tricky parts of all of this is that when you're in the midst of it, it's really hard to be able to see what's at play. So you really need to be able to strongly hone your observational skills and even remove your own personal judgments to be able to identify places like this that are happening. But the other thing that you can do to really begin to develop a radar for this human irrationality is to begin to learn a lot of the different psychological patterns that humans follow. And I realize that in a video about books, it may sound strange to recommend other books, but I do think that there are a few really great books that help break this down into pieces that are more easily digested and remembered. So Rory speaks about a lot of these concepts and effects and mental heuristics, aka mental patterns that we just follow automatically, but in a way that is a bit random. And there are some books, namely Predictably Irrational, Influence, and my personal favorite, which is Thinking Fast and Slow. All three of those break down the different human psychology principles in a way that is going to make it much easier to then observe in the wild, if you will. So lesson 1 and lesson 2 are really two parts of a whole, which, as I mentioned, I think the premise of the whole book, even though he says he has 11 rules, can really be distilled down to perception is everything, and we have the ability to change our perception. And oftentimes the logical choice is not really the one that's going to lead us to that breakthrough aha moment. So the second side of human irrationality is that context matters. So we even saw that in the example that Rory's talking about with somebody who is unemployed versus retired. And all of these details are more or less the same in their lives, but the terms and the way that we describe them, what we apply to one or the other, is completely going to change our reality and whether we perceive it as positive or negative. So context matters. We can't change reality, but we can change perception. And that is a brilliant quote from Rory that I think perhaps may be the banner takeaway of this entire book. To further drive this point home, let's hear again from Rory from another one of his very popular TED Talks.
Here's another naive advertising man's question again. And this shows that engineers, medical people, scientific people have an obsession with solving the problems of reality. When actually most problems, once you reach a basic level of wealth in society, most problems are actually problems of perception. So I ask you another question. What on earth's wrong with placebos? They seem fantastic to me. They cost very little to develop. They work extraordinarily well. They have no side effects, or if they do, they're imaginary, so you can safely ignore them. The point of placebo education is interesting. How many problems of life can be solved actually by tinkering with perception, rather than that tedious, hard-working and messy business of actually trying to change reality?
So you see here with this example how sometimes it's really just a matter of reframing in order to solve the problem, essentially, which is so often not the route that we take when we are trying to figure out a solution, especially when there is that intensity of, oh my gosh, we're losing money, or we're not growing fast enough, or this competitor is outperforming us. We get so locked into feeling like we need to do something new, when in fact, what may actually be the better solution is reframing something that we are already doing, which is going to be less expensive, less time consuming, and have a more immediate result. But this is one of those things where Rory makes it look so incredibly simple, and it's not. He is just at the absolute top of his game. It is the equivalent to watching an Olympian perform in their sport, where they are just on a whole other level with their physicality and their mental acuity that we could do their exact same training routine and we would still never be able to perform like that. So even though Rory is really in a league of his own, there are some things that you can do to begin to find a different perspective and perhaps hunt out a Rory perspective shift of brilliance. So your homework for the first 2 lessons is to reframe the problem or the solution. And to do that, there are a set of questions that you can ask. 1, what assumptions are you making about your customers? In other words, this could be, what am I assuming that my customers know? What am I assuming that they care about? What am I assuming are things that are absolutely deal breakers? It's very possible that what you think is important to your customers is actually not important to them at all. And then on the flip side, what assumptions are your customers making about you? How often do we remove ourselves from our interior position looking out to the customers and put ourselves into the mindset of the customer to think, what might they be assuming about me? Maybe where is there a gap between how I want them to be perceiving me and how they are actually perceiving me? And this is a place where sometimes it can be difficult to really do that kind of mental gymnastics. And so two ways of being able to get around this is, 1, to talk to some strangers who know nothing about you, give them the information that they need, and then ask them for their opinion. A second is to use AI to help identify what AI perceives as how you are showing up. So this could be giving it some content from your website or some of your recent social media posts, and then asking it to identify, who do you perceive as the audience of this? What are the assumptions that I'm making with this? Like, what are the things that I think people know? What are the gaps here that I need to fill to make this more clear and compelling? And a set of other questions, which if you would like those, drop a comment and I'm happy to share the exact prompt with you. But this is a great way to be able to quickly and easily identify how you think you're being perceived versus how you are actually being perceived. Number 3, Rather than trying to solve the problem by doing something new, is there a way that you can take a different approach to the problem and to reframe it? So I was speaking at the Prosper Show a few years ago, and one of the brands that I was on the panel with was talking about a situation that they had where they launched a new set of pajamas and they got a lot of really, do you say pajamas or pajamas? Not relevant, but sometimes I say pajamas and sometimes I say pajamas, and it just felt so wrong that I said pajamas just now. So anyway, this company launched a new set of pajamas, and that felt much better. And they got a lot of negative reviews talking about how sheer and see-through these pajamas were. And so they had a dilemma. Do we just scrap these products and write them off as a loss? Or can we reframe things to take a different perspective? And they chose to reframe. And rather than writing them off as a loss, they rewrote the content of their product page and changed the images to actually highlight the fact that these were sheer. They were also very lightweight and breathable, so they were a great option for summertime for people that sleep hot. And so something that was initially a problem that would have led a lot of businesses to potentially take a loss, they were able to reframe that problem into a unique selling point that actually helped that product perform very, very well. So sometimes we are looking for this big decision when in fact it may be a subtle shift that we can make that could in fact have a massive impact on how we perform moving forward. Step 4 is to zoom all the way out, to stop trying to think of the most logical, reasonable, or expected of things, and intentionally try to be as out of the box as possible with your solutions to this problem. So just really allow your creativity to play. So many times we take things so seriously in a way that makes us feel very locked into the expected. And we see from Rory's massively successful career that it is actually by defying logic that he was able to be as successful as he has been. And so if you want to be able to play at even close to that same level, if you are keeping a narrow box and keeping your creativity restricted, then you are not going to be able to come up with these massive light bulb solutions that could be true game changers for your business. So just play. There are no wrong answers. This is really just giving you the opportunity to start exercising that creative muscle. Lesson 3, branding isn't just something to add to great products. It's essential to their existence. I don't know if this is one of the star takeaways of the book, but this to me was one of the true golden nuggets that I think actually didn't get enough stage time in this book, because it is at the heart of all of the breakthroughs that he is talking about and these just incredible results that he was achieving. These were all made possible because of this piece. Because branding can play such a vital role from so many different aspects. So it's not just about recognition and being known and developing that presence in the market. It is also such a valuable tool at being able to build trust and to contend with issues so that marketers can then do a better job with what they need to do. So branding is an integral aspect of being able to be a good marketer. And if you don't have a strong brand, then it is just not going to be able to have the full effect that it would otherwise. So in order to build out a really strong brand, it's more than just a simple exercise, but here's your homework for this section, which is to do a fun little activity that I find to be incredibly powerful when I am working with businesses and really trying to help them take things to the next level. Because so often when people are describing their brand, they'll just use a few simple adjectives and call it a day. So maybe they'll say, oh, we are lighthearted and have a sense of humor and kind. And that just doesn't really have much substance to it. And so this is a really fun activity that you can do either by yourself or with your team. And it's also going to create a really helpful asset that you can use when you are collaborating with other people in your business so that you can all be aligned in how to begin to embody your brand through all of the different things that you're doing as you interact and grow your business. And so this is creating a brand identity or a brand persona. So you may be familiar with your customer avatar or a really thorough profile that precisely describes who your customer, your target customer is. So this is doing that same kind of exercise, but for your own brand. So it is actually going through and treating your brand as if it were a living, breathing person and getting as specific as possible. So we're talking about age, we're talking about where your brand lives, but we're also talking about things like what shows would your brand watch if it were a person, and what would its favorite food be, and what influencers does it follow online, and what style of comedy does it like or not like, and what are the issues that keep it up late at night, and what kind of clothing does it wear. And all of these details are going to start to be able to fill in that intangible space that is massive when you're saying that you're lighthearted, funny, and kind. Now we can all imagine what that really means and how to embody it when we're interacting with customers and when we're creating a new website and when we're doing all of these different things. So it helps make it so much more applicable to what you're doing. Now, that is just one facet of branding, but that is a really great starting point for something that you can do today to take your branding into a much more intentional space. A bonus point, I wouldn't necessarily call this a lesson, but I think it's something that's really interesting to consider, especially when you're trying to think about how to position your product and its benefits in a way that's really going to connect with your customers. And this was the point of most products, in the words of Rory, most products have an ostensible official function and an ulterior function. So a couple of examples that he gave for this was that dishwashers give you a place to put dirty dishes. So rather than just having them be stacking up in the sink, you can store them in your dishwasher until you clean them, because obviously you don't clean them the moment that you put them in there. Similarly, the door close button on the elevators is a placebo button. In other words, it doesn't actually do anything. It just helps people that are impatient or stressed, make them feel like they have a little bit of control over the situation. So this is something that may be worthwhile in considering when you are thinking about ways of being able to speak with your customers and thinking about, are there maybe details that are not compelling enough to be a selling point, but are still a facet of your product that, even if you're not speaking to it directly, could be helpful in understanding the way that your customers are interacting with and thinking about that item, and just for consideration, or potentially even something that would be worth calling out. Now, I don't expect to see dishwasher manufacturers suddenly start highlighting for a place for you to stash your dirty dishes as being the hallmark call out of the item. In fact, I wouldn't even expect them to be using that in their marketing, but this is just another way that you can also begin to stretch and strengthen that creative muscle, which that brings me to lesson 4, which is curiosity is your best asset. The better that you can get at really embracing and strengthening your curiosity about everything, the more naturally that all of these other things will come. So it really takes a lot of mental exercise and practice to be able to come up with things as quickly or as creatively as Rory does. But if you aspire to thinking more like him, then you need to start by getting more curious. And so this one of the best ways, and this is actually a little piece of homework that I like to give new writers or marketers when I am training them, is to tell them to pay attention to a few different advertisements that they are interacting with as they go about their day and in their life, because we are bombarded with ads and pieces of marketing all of the time, but most of it we are very good at tuning out. But when you're able to actually pause and pay attention, then that can give you a point of opportunity to think about, what is their objective with this? Why are they choosing to advertise this on a billboard? Or what is this person's goal in presenting this item in the way that they are on their TikTok page? It can either be things that stand out to you that make you want to engage, or similarly things that are off-putting to you or that you would by gut just kind of go right past. Why is that? And so once you identify some of those, then ask yourself, if it rang true to you, what made this stand out? If it didn't, why did this not have its desired intent with me? And just beginning to pick it apart. Why is going to be your best question here? And I do this all the time. I'm driving down the road, I'm paying attention to the billboards, and I'm like, that's weird, or that's kind of funny. Or I'm paying attention to the different techniques that even on packaging, and thinking about, why did a company choose to use that kind of graphic or those colors? What is their goal behind that? And this is a way to begin to just start shifting how you're looking at things. So it's from less of a personal perspective, and you begin to become more of an observer of human behavior and human thought. And then that opens up the entryway to all of these other things that we've spoken about today. So in summary, the 4 lessons: humans are irrational, context matters, you can't change reality, but you can change perspective. Branding isn't something to add to great products, it's essential to their existence. And curiosity is your best asset. Now, if you want to take all of these lessons and this homework that I gave you to the next level, then you really need to spend time doing what Rory says, which is building out a strong brand. So in order to take that next step in building a really strong brand, not just for today, but for the future, then go ahead and click this video right here that should be popping up on the screen now, and go ahead and go watch that, because it's going to give you some concrete steps to take on how you can build a really killer brand. And I will be seeing you over there. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Bye.